A researcher is testing the claim that 62% of Americans believe that the economy is the most important issue in America today. In a survey including a simple random sample of 1,200 Americans, 782 of them responded by placing the economy as their top concern. The researcher performed an appropriate test with null hypothesis of p equals 0.62 and alternate hypothesis of p not equal to 0.62. He used an alpha equals 0.05 level as his standard. What is the value of the test statistic? So, the test statistic, maybe you've gotten a little bit far in statistics, but haven't gotten that far. The test statistic is basically like a z-score, but for sampling distributions. So for those of you that have had even less statistics than that, basically there's this value called the standard deviation, which is like a measure of average spread. And the test statistic says how many standard deviations away from our null hypothesis, from our like supposed value, is our data point away from. So like let's say that right here is our null hypothesis, right? This is at 0.62. And over here, right? This is our alternative hypothesis, right? That 0.62, that the proportion is not equal to 0.62. But what this point over here is, it's actually like what came out in our sample, right? So in this case, we have 1,200 Americans and 782 of them responded yes. So that's a proportion of 0.65166, right? Okay, and this is a distance. Not even talking about test statistics yet. This is a distance of 0.031666. Okay, so that's how far away from our null hypothesis our sample is from. So, okay, so this value is going to equal some sort of like standard deviation or standard error multiplied by the number of standard errors away it is, and that's what our test statistic is. So this is going to be our test statistic. Okay, so in short, this number right here is a measure of how far away from our null hypothesis is our sample. Okay, you can imagine that if we had like a really big difference, then this number would be a lot bigger, right? And this is equal to our standard error, right, which is like a measure of spread in a sampling distribution, multiplied by how many standard errors away from it is, which is the same thing as a test statistic, right? Our test statistic is how many standard errors away from our null is our sample. Okay, so there's another formula we're going to have to use to calculate this. We can use it to calculate the standard error. The standard error of a proportion like this is equal to the square root of p, which is it's actually p hat. This is our sample proportion. Or wait, actually, I almost messed that up. It's equal to p times 1 minus p divided by n, where p is the proportion that we use in our null hypothesis, right? So our standard error will be the square root of 0.62 multiplied by 1 minus 0.62, which is 0.38, divided by our sample size, which is 1,200 people. And if I evaluate this, I get 0.01401. All right, so 0.31666 equals our standard error, which is 0.01401, multiplied by our test statistic. So from here, to find the value of the test statistic, we just divide by the standard error, and we get a standard error, and we get a test statistic of 2.26. All right, so hopefully you learned something. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment if you want me to explain something more in depth, and I will see you next time.